Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our seminar. Does it work? Yeah, okay. So welcome to our seminar in Ecology and Evolution of Montpellier. For those of you who are online, as usual, you are in a webinar mode, which means that your cameras and the microphones are automatically switched off. If you have any technical issue, please report using the chat. And if you want to ask questions to our speaker, you can use the Q&A tab at the end of the talk. And without losing any minutes, I give you the floor to introduce today's speaker. Thank you.
So Nicolas asked me to introduce Finn. I didn't do it in English because I'm not going to be able to translate it like online, so I'm going to do it in French. Sorry for. And you can translate it online on Zoom if you. C'est avec un grand plaisir que nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui pour le thème de Finn. Ce séminaire, c'est un peu particulier parce qu'il marque une étape spéciale. Finn s'apprête à prendre à la retraite, mais j'ai cru comprendre que c'était un faux départ, qu'elle allait rester un petit peu dans les.
Je fais semblant de partir. Je regarde la clé.
Si j'ai bien compris, tu vas faire une sorte de une réflexion sur tes travaux. Donc, avant tout, je tiens à remercier pour avoir accepté de faire ce séminaire, de partager ce moment avec nous, parce que je pense que ce type de séminaire devrait être proposé à tous les scientifiques de notre communauté qui s'apprêtent à partir à la retraite. C'est vraiment sympa de proposer ça. Alors, bien sûr, bon, on m'a demandé de présenter Finn. Bien sûr, beaucoup d'entre vous le connaissent déjà, mais bon, je vais pas faire un panégyrique de ta carrière. Pas complet en tout cas, mais je vais saisir cette opportunité pour revenir sur les grandes lignes. Donc, Finn, c'est quand même 45 ans de recherche au CEFE et surtout 45 ans de passion pour le mutualisme entre les figuiers et leurs pollinisateurs. L'histoire entre Finn et les figuiers a commencé en 1979, quand il était étudiant en INAPG à Paris. Il a réalisé un mémoire de stage qu'il a fait à la place d'un UV de figure végétale qui ne plaisait pas, je crois, c'est ça.
Le prof était vraiment pas bon.
Voilà. Et depuis, il est resté fidèle à cet amour de jeunesse. Alors, cela l'a conduit à réaliser une thèse sous la direction de Georges Valderon, consacrée aux stratégies de reproduction des figuiers. C'est probablement une des premières thèses du laboratoire à s'inscrire dans la discipline émergente au CEFE de l'écologie-évolutive. Donc, elle a été soutenue en 1983. Un petit peu de temps. Mais cette thèse a ouvert la voie à 40 ans de recherche sur les figuiers et ses pollinisateurs. Alors, certains pourraient dire qu'il est peut-être un peu réducteur de consacrer sa carrière à un seul système biologique, mais en réalité, à travers ce modèle, Finn a exploré une multitude de questions fondamentales en biologie évolutive, la coévolution, la dynamique des interactions interspécifiques, la stabilité des mutualismes, même si aujourd'hui il va tuer la reine rouge, si j'ai bien compris, l'évolution des stratégies de reproduction des insectes, la stabilité des communautés d'insectes, la biogéographie historique et j'en passe. Alors pour cela, il a utilisé la génétique, la phylogénétique, l'écologie-chimie, la modélisation, des approches expérimentales. Bref, malgré les apparences, Finn est tout sauf un monomaniaque. Donc, en parallèle, Finn a encadré 23 thèses et un nombre impressionnant de mémoires de master. Alors, parmi ces anciens étudiants, on trouve des chercheurs qu'on connaît bien. Il y en a pas mal dans la salle. Michel, Sandrine, qui était en master avec Finn, moi qui étais en thèse, Astrid, Finn a quand même à la thèse, et j'en vois d'autres, je ne vais pas citer tout le monde. Donc, par son encadrement exigeant, mais toujours bienveillant, il a contribué, on peut dire, à former une génération de chercheurs et de chercheuses à Montpellier, et aussi grâce à de nombreuses collaborations internationales. Alors, je dirais ce que distingue Finn comme mentor et collaborateur, pour moi, après, je vais penser autre chose, c'est son enthousiasme communicatif, sa rigueur scientifique et sa créativité débordante. Ces qualités, elles ont non seulement enrichi ses doctorants et collaborateurs, mais elles ont aussi influencé l'ensemble des étudiants et jeunes chercheurs des équipes qui passaient dans le labo. Je me souviens qu'à la fin il n'y a pas longtemps, quand j'ai soutenu ma thèse, donc on écrivait un article ou un rapport dans l'équipe coévolution, il était inconcevable de finaliser une discussion d'un rapport, ou d'un article sans la soumettre à Finn. Alors avec son esprit aiguisé, il décelait immanquablement les failles du raisonnement, des conclusions hâtives, des arguments mal fondés, tout en apportant toujours une idée originale. Voilà, je me rappelle il fallait enlever les phrases tiroirs, les phrases tarte à la crème, les cadavres, enlever les cadavres dans le placard. J'y repense encore et je le fais encore quand je relis. Il m'arrive encore de penser, tiens, je ferais bien relire ça à Finn avant de le soumettre. Mais une carrière scientifique, c'est pas seulement produire des résultats ou encadrer des étudiants, c'est aussi, voilà, Finn a également joué un rôle essentiel dans les structures scientifiques locales et nationales. Dans les années 80, il a été une figure, je pense, assez centrale dans la construction de l'école de biologie évolutive à Montpellier. Il a dirigé des équipes, des départements, participé à l'école doctorale, participé à divers conseils scientifiques. Donc, je pense que ces contributions, associées à ces recherches, ont largement contribué à faire de Montpellier un pôle renommé en biologie évolutive. D'un côté plus personnel, Finn est né en Suède, comme son nom l'indique. Il a grandi et vécu en France. Alors, il est complètement français, bilingue, mais il est resté profondément attaché à ses racines nordiques. Donc, il m'a expliqué d'ailleurs que certaines incompréhensions de son humour trouvent leur origine dans ses différences culturelles. Pour parler des bars, un détail qui a toujours ajouté à nos interactions avec lui. Donc voilà, aujourd'hui, je profite de cette occasion pour remercier Finn pour son encadrement, son investissement dans le collectif, sa contribution majeure à notre compréhension des interactions mutualistes. Et nous sommes impatients de t'écouter et tu vas nous parler
de ta thèse. Well, it's a pleasure today to make a speech, and I was thinking about what would be beautiful and what was the most nice and communicative part of what we have done all together on FIG. And I think the story about pollination, active, passive pollination, how the flowers within the FIG are used for some of the best part. And also, I think when I started working on FIG, the story is that theory in evolutionary biology was mature already. I think there have been progress in that, but it's marginal. The real basis was already there in the 80s. And what we needed to do was to get out in the field and see how that theory played out in the field, in the real life, with the possibilities. So I would also like to thank the people who are online, because normally there's probably Brazil, there is South Africa, there is England, there is China, different places. So this is a worldwide conference. Did I want to say? I don't remember. Yeah, so here, research on figs and fig wasps is just, we do it together. And there's a bunch of results coming out, and the aim is to do it together, to provide ideas to each other, so that we manage to make progress in something which is very big. So what is a fig tree? A fig tree produces figs. That is a simple definition. Figs can be valuable. Thanks, Jean-Yves and Astrid. And what is really a fig, if we open it up, it's an inflorescence. It is closed. The inside is lined with pistillate flowers. And at this stage, just after anthesis, the staminate flowers are still very small. So very strong protogeny. And what really defines a fig is the fig bud here, that stage. So this is the figs that you have out in on the trees just now, on the male trees. And you have this small fig. You see the bracts. You see a layer of flower primordia. And this is compressed by the osteoblast. This is the motor of morphogenesis in figs. It allows incredible possibilities. Before the fig was closed, it was not a fig. So here we see when it has just relaxed a bit its structure. So this grows, and here the flower begins to grow synchronously. So this is just the big synchronization through action by the osteoblast. Of course, this is closed, so you need particular insects to effect pollination. And these are the fig wasp, Agaonidae. And well, they are specialized. They've got modified antennae to go through the entrance of the fig, through the ostiole. They've got mandibular appendages to grab themselves through the entrance of the figs. They've got claws, they've got different things. They are very smooth and they drop their wings. So, and here is a fig developing with some wasp larvae, some seeds inside, everything in each inside a flower. Then the fig wasp will disperse and carry pollen in a dangerous trip. And just to give an idea of the importance of fig wasps, above the canopy in Borneo, 50% of the insects drifting in the wind are fig pollinating wasps. So it's an incredible resource. Okay, so why is it a nice model system? it's a nice because almost every fig wasp species breeds in a single host species. So we have a nice species-specific interaction, nice mutualism. There are maybe 850, maybe 900 ficus species. It depends where you cut. There may be 1,000 if you cut a bit more. Species on all continents. So you've got a diversity of situations and of evolutionary histories on the different continents. So, and ficus and pollinating wasp are largely parallel. There are some major mismatches, of course, but largely it's co-diversification, and it's the most extreme example of plant-insect co-diversification. This allows to follow traits, adaptation, co-adaptation, very nice model. So, and we have independent co-evolutionary answers in the different lineages. And today, I wanted to look at two aspects of this source of variation. We've got two breeding systems. We've got monoecious ficus species, in which the figs produce pollinating wasp, seeds, and pollen. And we've got dioecious ficus species, in which the figs, half of the tree just produce seeds. They are nicely female. And half of the trees, well, they've got female flowers, but the female flowers produce insects, and these figs also produce pollen. So these figs, so pollen vector and pollen, this is male. So, and then we've got two types of pollination, active and passive. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. So, I wanted to put a title. We have a problem with the evolution of mutualism. It is that we don't have a theory. Globally, if someone can provide me with a theory of the evolution of mutualism, I suspect we can discard it for different reasons. So here, one classical way of looking at co-evolving organisms is a red queen. It comes from parasitology. And the story is that in a landscape that evolves, you have to run. And if you don't run, you disappear because the other ones run faster than you. They evolve faster and you are outcompeted. Dead end. But if you look at figs and fig wasps, we've got a problem. Fig trees are long-lived. We have to count in tens of years, if not in hundreds of years. The fig pollinating ones are very short-lived. Very often it's just one month for larval development. Outside the fig, it's a few hours. They are very numerous, the fig pollinating wasps. They are several orders of magnitudes more numerous than the fig trees. So fig pollinating wasps should respond faster to selection than fig trees. And effectively, if we look at the speed of evolution of the genomes, it's not comparable between fig pollinating wasp and fig trees. So we've got an evolutionary problem. It is that if there is an evolutionary race between the fig tree and the fig wasp, the fig tree loses, the system disappears. So we may wonder why there is no co-evolutionary race. And I think what is important, like in many other mutualisms, we've got the large organism, the tree, which shapes space. And this is a space in which the fig wasp lives, or other organisms in other mutualisms. And because of the conformation of that space, selection on the fast evolving partner is not disruptive. So the idea is that fig morphology determines selection on wasp behavior, and it also controls the consequences of wasp behavior. So it's a canalization of the selection. So instead of running, you can sit down and be in peace. So this is what we're going to look through. Okay, so we can look at flower use in the monoecious ficus. So I take the cycle of development here. We have a receptive fig. It's attracting fig pollinating wasps. They enter, they oviposit, they pollinate. Then the fig develops. The flower develops within the fig. You've got seeds. You've got young insects. They get out of the figs. They get pollen, and they may reach a receptive fig. Go to a receptive fig, and then after that, the fig ripens and will attract seed dispersal. And then it continues and it continues. So here we've got an image. You've got seeds, you've got wasp larvae, you've got pollen. So, well, we have a pistillate flower may give a seed or a wasp. So if we think about the plant, it's selected to allocate part of its female pistillate flower, female flowers, to seed production, for the female function, and part of the pistillate flowers to wasps that will disperse its pollen for its male function. Well, and the wasps, well, they are selected to produce as many offspring as possible in the fig. So we may wonder, why don't wasps oviposit in all flower? And also, why they pollinate? So to understand that, we have to have a closer look at the biology of the interaction. So here, what happens when a fig is receptive? We've got a receptive fig here. And here we've got a wasp that has entered a receptive fig. It inserts its ovipositor into a flower to lay an egg. Here we've got a wasp like this. It is taking its time to oviposit slowly. So the ovipositor is inserted and it will, and there it has a movement of its legs, forelegs. It picked a bit of pollen, it put it on the stigmas. And then again, it picks a bit of pollen in the pocket, puts it on the stigmas. This is active pollination. Behavior just to carry pollen. Before leaving the fig, the wasp puts pollen into the pocket. After leaving, goes on. Then the flowers develop. And sometimes later, they may emerge. They cut a hole into the wall containing the female, insert their genitalia, make the female. And after that, they do. Then you have this stage where you have mating holes here, mating holes, but the females still stay in the fig. So here you've got a series of females waiting inside, and the males cut an exit hole, and that's that moment the females begin to emerge into the fig cavity. So here you've got a female getting out of her gall. Some are still in their galls here. And she moves out, she goes to an anther, she picks pollen, puts it into the pocket, and we start her trip. Alternatively, in other species, pollination is passive. The fig tree produces bunches of pollen, and the fig wasp just gets loaded with heaps of pollen. So this is about 2 millimeters, this is 10 microns. And after that, the fig ripens. You get diverse birds and animals who will start eating the figs. So we really have a theoretical challenge here in monoecious ficus species, because a pistillate flower can give a seed or a wasp offspring. So why don't wasps oviposit in all flowers? And if we go through the literature, there is a US answer which is called sanctions. And everybody knows sanctions don't work. So we could propose an alternative formulation. Would they really produce more offspring if they laid the egg everywhere? So how can a conflict be avoided? So the first idea was that we have heterogeneous style lengths in figs, and fig wasps could prefer shorter style flowers because they were accessible, and not the longer style flowers because they did not access them. Here we see the inside of a fig. We've got this flower, which has a short style. This one has got a long style. If we imagine a wasp that has an ovipositor this long, it will not oviposit here. Unfortunately, this one has intermediate lengths. So any variant with a long ovipositor is selected for. So this cannot be stable, so it does not work that way. We have to look elsewhere. Another question, which Emmanuel answered, is do the wasps really oviposit in shorter styled flowers? And we can look at this here. The short styled flower here, it's got a long pedicel, it's close to the fig cavity. The long styled flower, it's got a short pedicel, the ovule is close to the fig wall. So if we look a bit later, look here, the seeds, that is a seed, that is a seed, that is a seed, they are close to the fig wall. And these are the wasp larvae ready to emerge. They are close to the cavity. So effectively, the wasps have been laid, the eggs have been laid in short styled flowers. So at least we know the wasps use the short styled flowers. Or rather, for instance, here we can see here, there's a wasp here, very close to the fig wall. They preferentially use short styled flowers. So it's a choice. They prefer to do it. They are not obliged. And there are different ideas about why they do that. And one is that there are powerful animals here out in the jungle There is a whole community of wasps associated with fig trees and with fig wasps. And so each species hosts a series of parasitoids which will feed on the pollinator. So here you've got the wasp, here you've got the sheath of the ovipositor, here you've got the ovipositor. So all this length here is already in the fig, and it can introduce up to here. So this is complicated because it's got to go through the fig wall, and they parasitize preferentially. Well, which one was the most accessible? This one. They would prefer to oviposit here. With the parasite, this is the most accessible. If there is a wasp larva here, it's very exposed. If it's here, it's less exposed. So very simple parasitic pressure selects the wasp to oviposit in short-styled flowers and to avoid the long-styled flowers. So we see how it works. It's like this here. Okay, so there are other problems too. For instance, here, a typical case of a wasp emergence from fig tree. You have got ants in the jungle, and the ants eat the fig wasps. And obviously, the ants need to know that there are fig wasps, so they will progressively accumulate when the fig wasps are emerging. So the first insects to come out will get free, and the later ones will be eaten. So now we look here, we see that we've got mating holes, that some females are mated. There are also some galls here where we don't see mating holes. So mating takes time within the fig. And if we look closer at it here, when the wasps begin to emerge, this gall is empty. It was in the cavity. This wasp has not emerged. It was close to the fig wall. In fact, the flowers which are deeper down close to the fig wall, the wasps emerge later. They are mated later. They emerge later. So they will be later to get out of the fig, they get eaten. So not a good idea to be in a flower deep down. So there are other reasons too, because packaging can be very hard. So sometimes it's more difficult to develop in the deep flowers. All this is packaging. So what is the source of this style variation? And obviously this has to do with flower packing. We have several layers of flowers. This allows to get more flowers into a receptive fig. But if we look at Moraceae in general, Ficus or Moraceae, then you have no heterostyle within inflorescence. We can take here, even here we've got something interesting. This is Castilia elastica. We've got an asynchronous onset of a primordial development. Despite that, at the end, we have homogeneous stylings. Now, if we look into a fig, the monoecious ficus species, here we have got the primordia at a stage where they are compressed by the osteolobract. So here, flower primordia, here's the osteolobracts, and here you have some more or less advanced primordia, and it's this heterogeneity of starting the primordia, which are compressed by the osteoloscale, which will generate this departure, which is a staggered between the different flowers in the development, and at the same time synchronized. This results in heterogeneous stylinces, and it's only possible because of the packaging of the fig. Before the figs, there was no heteroscaling. So, okay, so this has to do with allows to have several layers of flower, and this flower packing stabilizes the mutualism because this flower packing results in heterogeneous stylinces and results in preferred ovules to ovipositing. So how do we conclude here? Well, fig wasps do not use all pistillate flower for oviposition in this ficus species because fig wasps prefer to oviposit in shorter styled flowers for several reasons. To protect the offspring from parasites, for the offspring to emerge faster, for the larvae to be less compressed, and series of things which just have to do with morphology. And so it's really flower stacking in several layers that control selection of wasp behavior, and several flower layers is just a way of packing ovules in a limited space. So, well, here the fig tree controls space and it affects the evolution of the pollinator. It stabilizes the mutualism. It's really what is in control. So let's go to the next question. Why do some wasps pollinate actively? And we may look at, so the wasp collects pollen here. And here you see the wasp putting pollen on the stigmas. It's a full speed. That was done once upon a time in the 80s with you see, this is slow motion in the jungle. It's incredible pictures. Okay, so here we've got a wasp in a fig, and it's picking the pollen from pockets. So first question, well, if they pollinate actively, it may have to do with what they eat. So we go into looking at flowers after oviposition. Here we've got a cut of an ovule, just at a stage. Here we've got a pollinator egg, which has been deposited. It's between the inner integument and the nucellus. Here we've got the inner integument, outer integument, nucellus, and here we've got the embryo sac. So at that stage, the wasp will develop, and then it will probably progressively move to the embryo sac. It will eat the fig embryo, and here the other cells of the embryo sac will give the nucellus. So the wasp will then feed on the nucellus, and the nucellus results from the double fertilization. So logically, good for pollination. Here we see later stage, we've got the wasp larvae here, and this is just endosperm. So it's really what the fig wasp is eating. So I would say yes, pollination ensures endosperm development through the double fertilization, and the wasp will feed on this endosperm. Simple. Except that in some species, development of the endosperm is initiated by the wasp and it's diploid. So some wasps don't need the double fertilization to initiate the development of the endosperm. So we may suggest that some species are very bad initiator of this development and some ones are good. We may wonder which one are good and why. So we may suggest that in active pollination, the larva feeds on endosperm, and ovule pollination ensures better larval development. Alternatively, it could be that, well, the developing fig, the more organs develop within the fig, the better it's nourished. It's the zinc effect, the traditional trait in plant physiology. And maybe there are other explanation. But we have a problem here is that this is very difficult to dissociate. So monoecious figs are complicated. It's better to go to dioecious figs. Much simpler. So dioecious ficus species, here is a male tree, functionally male tree. The wasp enter, it oviposits in female flowers. It has pollen, it pollinates. Then later on, the wasp emerge into the figs. There are no seeds. They pick pollen. Some will go to female trees, and it's bad luck. They will die there without having any offspring. But the fig will ripen and feed a lot of animals. But then the other ones will move to a male tree. In the male tree, they find female flowers in which they can oviposit. They pollinate, they oviposit, and well, no seed produced. Why and how? Well, and how do we manage to get a single homogeneous style length? It's short style in here we've got short styles, here we've got short style and very long style. Really very different style lengths. But homogeneous short in male figs, homogeneously long in female figs. So very simple. There under the bracts, the ostial bracts, this is synchronous onset of development of the flower primordial. So really the difference is if it's synchronous, it gives homogeneous style length, it's a dioecious species. If it's asynchronous, then it gives a monoecious species. Okay, so that the wasp enters, it oviposits, afterwards the seeds develop and it gives a nice fig. Here the wasp enters, it oviposits, you've got larvae developing and then the wasp emerge. Here the males cutting an exit hole and a female leaving. So we wonder, why do some wasps pollinate actively? Can it be here? No, because the wasp has no offspring. So it must happen here in a fig in which there are no seeds. So we need to go to, well, the wasp oviposits, so probably the pollen has got a function. The wasp pollinates actively, so the pollen must have a function, but there are no seeds produced. So a simple hypothesis is that well, the wasps pollinate because they benefit from fertilization of the ovule into which they oviposit, and pollen deposition must be very precise. So what is it in real life? We can see a wasp here arriving a fig, a wasp entering a fig. It has lost part of its antennae, and here it's in the canopy. You see the styles here, which are quite short. The wasp is going to oviposit. Here we see the wasp has inserted its ovipositor, it's laying the egg, and there it's beginning to pick pollen here. It takes time, it takes a lot of time. In fact, it's extracting one pollen grain, 10 microns. And there, lifts up, it puts the pollen on the hypopygium. Now it inserts the ovipositor, the hypopygium enters the flower, puts the pollen grain. See it again here? It's coming, it's coming. Yes! So it picks the pollen in the pollen pocket, and that's just one pollen grain. So it must be very careful because at that size, everything sticks together due to electrostatic forces. And it puts the pollen here. Now, if we look at, and so they pollinate really systematically. So this is Chinese work. So you see 330 sequences observed, 329 included pollination behavior, and counting pollen grains of the wasp, pollen grains at the beginning of a position, at the end of a position, allowed to determine that it was a number of eggs, allowed to determine that it was one pollen grain per flower. Yeah. So if we look a bit closer here, you see here, here's the flower, the style, and the stigmatic papillae are within the style. They're not outside. So it's only when the hypopygium is introduced into the style here that the pollen grain touches the stigmatic papillae, and the pollen grain is removed, and it will germinate. This really excludes pollination of flowers into which the hypopygium is not introduced. So, yes, what deposits pollen in the styles of the flower into which they are deposited? Now we may wonder what happens in a female fig tree, because in a female fig tree, the wasp does not oviposit. It tries to oviposit each time, but then the sequence is not ended because it cannot lay an egg. So what does it do afterwards? In fact, it does not lay an egg before the end of the oviposition sequence. So what will it do at that time? It's based on behavioral correlations between what happens in a male fig and a female fig, and we may suspect that it may be a little bit disorderly. So here we've got a wasp. It looks nice here. Up. It's in a female fig. What will it do here? Not too bad. Quite similar. So yes, doing the same as in a male fig, approximately. Up, getting out that, putting the pollen here. So it looks similar, but in fact, it's not totally similar because it does not pollinate all the time. It just pollinates less frequently, but every time it takes several pollen grains, so it compensates. So 1 time out of 5, it does pollination movements, and that poses a challenge for the fig tree, obviously. And if we look at the female fig, here we've got the styles are very different. And if you look at the side of the styles there, you've got stigmatic papillae, and all this is fused together. And when the wasp walks around, the hypopygium will touch the surface of these stigmas, and pollen will be removed progressively. Further, you can have secondary dispersal of pollen because this makes more or less of a surface, and the pollen can be deposited, the grain can be deposited here, and the pollen tube can germinate and go down here. So we've got a form of dispersal of pollen that is really an adaptation to active pollination in figs. So we see it here with pictures from Emmanuel, with plenty of pollen grains deposited, which we don't see that in the male figs. The pollen is really precisely deposited. Here it's outside, and you see the pollen grain germinating and going down here, another style. So simple mechanism. So in fact, with active pollination, in the female figs, the fig morphology just compensates for wasp pollination behavior by producing this externally papillate styles in the fig skin. So here, once more, the wasp does its behavior and the fig tree has adapted. And in the male figs, the behavior of the wasp is canalized because this is what optimizes its selective value. So we may look at what happens in passive pollination instead. So a wasp that does not carry pollen purposely, that does not have pollen pockets. So here we have the fig with the wasp developing here in the galls, the male flowers almost ready to ripen. And here you see the wasp getting out. It's totally covered with pollen, and it will carry pollen in its body. So basically, if we look at the male figs, pollen deposition is not controlled by the wasp. And in a male tree, we may imagine that the tree is selected not to produce seeds, else it's not a male tree. So we expect that we have bad pollen germination in male trees and can look at what happens. So here we've got a receptive male tree. All these small flowers are the receptive flowers. And here we've got the wasp moving within. And here you've got the stigmas. They're quite different from the previous set. And if you look very closely here, well, the papilla, there are no papillae. This is very bad for pollen germination. These flowers are not made to allow pollen germination. And so, of course, poor pollen germination if you don't have stigmatic papillae. On the other hand, in female figs, the stigmas must pick pollen. And where should they pick pollen? On the body of the wasps. So to ensure seed formation. So we may expect that we have, yes, nice long stigmas, same species. Same species. And you see here, they are covered with tiny small papillae, and this will brush the surfaces of the wasp and get the pollen. So very simple morphological adaptation. The another species that Emmanuel looked at, so here's a male plant, you see similar thing, different, probably different origin of passive pollination, but you've got these non-papillate stigmas and papillate stigmas in the female plant. And if we look at pollen germination in this case, we're back to Emmanuel's PhD. Here we've got, well, pollen has difficulties germinating here. You've got callose plugs, they do not grow down the style. On the female fig, they just grow down the style very efficiently. So a simple protection mechanism, which means that you have the fig are adapted in male figs to avoid flower fertilization, in female figs to facilitate flower fertilization. The side effect here is that in male figs, wasp larvae develop in non-pollinated flowers, so they are all capable of doing efficient endosperm initiation. They don't need pollen to do that. So they have evolved the capacity to do that. They do no longer need pollen. We can look at the history of that. And of course, one can do phylogenies to understand what is active, what is passive, where they come from. You can also look at morphology, like Jean-Yves, and here, for instance, a typical passive pollinator, and you got the trace of a pollen pocket. So its ancestors were active. And in fact, going passive is a one-way trip. You go passive, you never return to active. So all the pollinators of dioecious figs were active pollinators in the past and have become passive. And so dioecious figs are monophyletic. Active pollination is ancestral. And we've got a series of losses of active pollination. And we can go through the phylogeny of the dioecious figs and look at the styles and the stigmas. And the story is played out the same way in the phylogeny. Each time a phylum turned passive pollination, there is the shift in morphology I showed you in the picture. So it's predictable. And basically, what we have is that active pollination up to what we have seen now is performed in a homogeneous way. It is costly for the wasp. It can be 1/3 of the time budget within the fig. And it's evolutionarily stable. It has been stable maybe for 40 million years, just because fig style and stigma morphology allow the wasp to control where pollen is deposited in male fig. And the wasp larvae always feed on fertilized endosperm. And if you suppress pollen, the larvae have problems developing. Passive pollination is a case of presents repeated convergent evolution of flower morphology. So, and in male trees, no flower fertilization, the wasp initiate the development in the ovule. So really, it's a trip of no return. Now we can look at passive pollination in monoecious ficus species. We come back to monoecious ficus. So these are fig trees in which a fig produces wasps and seeds. So just one type of fig with shorter style and longer style flowers. And the wasp like to oviposit here. And the fig tree wants to produce seeds here. So how does it work? Well, the wasp does not control where pollen is deposited because it's passive. So, and the tree is selected to produce seeds. So we may expect that we have a stigma morphology that will favor pollen transfer to the long-styled flowers. Let's go and look at this. So here, stage when the wasps are emerging, plenty of pollen. The wasps get loaded with pollen, and it will enter a receptive fig. So here, the wasp has just entered, nice stigmas, papillate stigmas. So this is really at the time of pollination. And if you look closer, this is a short-styled flower. This is a long-styled flower. And these ones will brush the surface of the wasp. This one will a little bit less. Especially here, we have opened up the fig. But if we look at it from above, here we have the tepals, which are covering the ovule. So we just got some stigmas sticking up. And those are those of the long-styled flowers, those in which the wasps don't want to oviposit because they are close to the fig wall. So just these flowers get pollinated. So this is one origin of passive pollination. And then we can go to another group of figs and look at another origin of passive pollination in a monoecious species. Here you've got the wasp walking around in a confusing bunch of stigmas. Here you've got a long-styled flower, a shorter styled flower here. And you see this is turning brown here. This is because the wasp has just oviposited there, and it produces a necrosis of the style. So here it's very easy. We see the wasp try to oviposit here, 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 but not in the longer style flowers. The longer style flowers also have long stigmas. They brush the surface of the wasp. Pollination is effective. So twice same solution in two different origins of passive pollination. And each time we've got passive pollination in monoecious figs, it works that way. So it's very simple, passive pollination. The tree controls where pollen goes by the morphology of the stigmas. Yeah, and as a consequence, wasp larvae develop with unfertilized flowers, so they have to be capable of inducing the development of the endosperm. And once you know how to do that, you never need to pollinate again, so probably you cannot go back to active pollination, maybe. Active pollination in monoecious ficus species, that is hell. So, why pollinate actively in the monoecious figs? It can be because it's good. Well, it's obviously because it's good for your offspring. The question is whether it's your larvae develop better in fertilized ovules, or it's because seed developing the fig produces a better sink for nutrients. And that is, well, very difficult to separate, but maybe we can try and see. We can look at, this is from Emmanuel's PhD, and we can look at see if there is an association between oviposition and ovule pollination. There is none, it's random. So why are these wasps not capable of being precise? Don't they want to be precise, or is it impossible? So we can look also at how wasps develop. We can put together into a fig wasp with pollen and wasp without pollen. And the offspring, well, wasp without pollen means that you have picked a fig, you have removed the male flowers, and you have a female emerging, you introduce it into another fig, and you see what happens. This is not my experiments. And what you have is that whether the fungus was with or without pollen does not count. What counts is was there a wasp with pollen in the fig. So it looks like it's not precise pollen deposition here. So an idea is that maybe there's something that makes it impossible for the wasp to be precise. And here we can see that is one group of monoecious fig in which we've got active pollination. And here we've got a stigma. And we saw a stigma earlier on in female monoecious figs, dioecious figs. The stigma allows secondary pollen germination, so it may reduce the precision of this position. In another lineage of actively pollinating dioecious fig, here you also have got a stigma. So here also, it's a suggestion that, well, you can look at it. Here is from Emmanuel's thesis years later on another group of figs, and we have this germination of pollen which moves between stigmas. However, we also have a third lineage of actively pollinated dioecious figs, and we have no stigma. So it's not always like that. Oh, right. There are good chances here that this one is, maybe it's true, but it's not sure that it was developed better in fertilized ovule. We could look at whether there are arguments to say that it's better to develop in a fertilized fig. And if we look at this wasp, so if we can look at oviposition over time, here, after 6 hours, all the eggs are laid. We look at pollen in the pockets. Pollen, all the pollen is still there. So these wasps begin by ovipositing and they pollinate after. They are really not trying to pollinate when they oviposit. They are pollinating everything. So basically here, it's clear that it's likely that really active pollination is because the fig becomes a good resource sink. And then maybe there are those points here. So we have got Ficus species with active pollination, but sometimes you've got, in a species with active pollination, you've got a wasp that does not actively pollinate anymore. So this one carries no pollen. It cannot produce seeds. It just oviposits. So here, a fig tree, here we see a coxal comb here. This is an active pollinator. There we have no coxal comb. This is a non-pollinating wasp. The pictures could be better. Okay, so if we look at number of offspring, the two species produce similar number of offspring. If we take the active pollinator, introduce it into a fig without pollen, we just let it emerge from a fig from which we have removed all the pollen, and similar number of offspring. So the wasp does not seem to benefit from active pollination, but still it does. Why? The parasites. Here, if you got seeds, you've got a layer protecting the offspring. If you don't pollinate, you don't have seeds, you don't have this layer. You're closer to the fig wall, you're more exposed to parasites. So this is another reason for active pollination, is just producing a protective layer. So, well, so we have a series of systems which maybe was developed better in fertilized ovule. We're not totally sure. It's certainly not sure in section Urosacea because the wasp could be precise. Well, a better thing says it's really a classic of physiology. And we also have this automatic process that protection against parasite. So we have got a series of factors which automatically favor active pollination in this case, favor the production of seeds. So, make a long story short, but figs do not use all pistillate flowers because they are happy to oviposit in shorter styled flowers for different reasons. There is active pollination in dioecious because the flower morphology enables that to be selected in the wasp, and the flower morphology, the fig morphology, allows this to produce seed production in female figs. And then in every time the fig morphology penalizes the story and the flower morphology. So, well, basically the answer here is really that the slower evolving partner really controls the arena, and all the selective pressures that ensue are such that the system remains stable. So I would say there is no red queen process. And I think this is a general rule in mutualisms, which associate large organism and small organism. The large organism organizes space, and the small one manages within that space and does its best according to selection, individual selection. So I'd like to thank you.
Well, thank you. Always wondering. Things are wonderful. You're completely right. And each presentation illustrates it nicely. One question about the dioecious fig. So the long style ones, the wasps cannot oviposit. Well,
Yeah,
they
it's
can.
strong.
Okay. So
Okay, there are two steps. There are two steps here. Of course, I can say because it's too long. Of course,
it's not the whole monoecious figs.
It's not a good answer. Or most of them are too long, and sometimes they may oviposit in one or two flowers within the fig. But after that, the fig is pollinated, and it got sweet when the wasp are to emerge. And the sweet and juicy fig is not a good habitat for a young wasp to emerge. So it's not a very good position to be born in. There are several reasons. It's not just silence.
You have experimental evidence for this sink effect or idea of experiment where you could actually show that there is this sink effect in monoecious species?
It's largely impossible to do it experimentally because, but it's very easy to see if it's not experimental. In fact, you've got, for instance, if you've got a large species with large figs, to fill it up, you need several females. If there's just one female, it may not be enough of a sink effect for the fig to remain on and it would drop. So we have a series of examples showing that, or if a wasp, in fact, even in male figs, if there are not enough larvae developing in a fig, the fig will drop. So, but direct experimental demonstration of this is very complicated because you shouldn't, yes.
Thank you, Finn. I remember the title of the journal Libération, the newspaper Libération. It was at the end of the 80s, I think. They used the title of French song. And probably for the oldest one, they will remember that Ah les filles, elles me rendent toute marteau. Ah les filles, elles me rendent toute marteau. At the time I translate Ah les filles, ils me rendent tous marteau. And yeah, I've been a bit lost in this expose. It was probably too rich for my brain, but I have a general question about the red queen. I don't understand why you say the red queen is not.
It does not apply to these systems.
No, well, the question is, I mean, during 1 hour, you said that the two partners are evolving, okay? And right, I mean, they are not probably evolving at the same pace, but they are still evolving. I mean, they are depending on each other. So what do we mean that the red queen doesn't work? We mean that the red queen doesn't work because you need to have two partners evolving at the same pace for the red queen to be a red queen? Or do you mean that there could be an evolution in figs that is evolved by the pollinators much faster, and then they can wait for some time, pollinators, and then the fig trees will evolve much slower? Is that what you mean, or?
Yes, the thing is that the fig wasp does not get out of control. So if you are, for instance, if you are an actively pollinated fig, you remain actively pollinated and rather convinced that the one who is making the move to passive pollination is a fig tree, not the insect. So I think the fig tree is always the leader in this story, because if it's not the leader, then the race is lost, because the pollinator evolves very rapidly, comparatively. I mean, you can really see it on genomes, and but also conceptually for evolution, it's okay, but also on genomes. If you take two genera of pollinators, you try to align the genomes, it's just stupid. Take a species from one genus and try to make some resequencing from another genus, you just can't. Within Ficus, you just can take any fig tree and do resequencing, and it works. So different speeds.
Is there evidence that there's when you have mutualism between more similarly lived organisms, is there faster coevolution in this case?
Similar organisms changes all the rules. That's a, well, okay. We may first ask what is mutualism, and then begin to think about how is individual selection. And this is a question that is not really, I think I've never seen a good definition of mutualism, and it's very simple to look at this here. For instance, the interaction between the fig and the fig wasp. If you look at the dioecious species, the female tree is a trap blossom. It's pollination by deceit. Do you call that mutualism? Is that interaction, if you look just at the wasp that enters a female fig, it rather looks like parasitism. But if you don't call that mutualism, your definition is wrong. So you need to have a definition that encompasses situation in which you have this conflict of interest. So it's not at the individual level that you have mutualism. And this is rather generalized in every system that we call mutualistic. So in very many mutualistic systems, it's just an association of organisms that creates novelty, something really novel, and that leads to the subsistence of this association in a new ecological niche.
Yes, but my point was that you were saying that here one of the protagonists is much larger and long-lived.
Yeah.
And this is what's causing stabilizing. But I was wondering if you it's evidence that interaction between more similar organisms in terms of history have faster coevolution.
They probably have a different story.
Yeah.
There's also another problem with this mutualism is that generally the spatial structure of the two species, interacting species, is not the same. It's a spatial genetic structure. This means that most of these systems, the spatial genetic structure is not the same. So, for instance, a theory of coevolution like the mosaic serial coevolution, it's difficult to conceive how it can work in this mutualism, simply because you don't have the same mosaic for the two partners.
So if I were to understand your points, is it really a true coevolution because wasps are following the tree, if I well understand it?
And it's not strict sense coevolution.
And
if you call it strict sense gene for gene coevolution, it's not strict sense.
And in this case, how do you explain the evolution of the non-active pollination by wasps?
By the wasps?
Yeah. Because in this case, you need to have some changes in fig morphology first. If I
mean, what are the intermediate situations and how do we move from one to the other one? Of course, yes, it's an interesting question. And we may also wonder, when we have intermediates, are the intermediate stabilized intermediates so that they are not on the path from one system to the other one, or whether they really show what is intermediate. So for the moment, the intermediates we've got, it's two species, two independent species, rather in the northern part of the distribution of Ficus, and you've got an actively pollinating fig wasp, and the fig tree has decided that it is passively pollinated. So they produce lots of answers, but the morphology of the stigma still follows rather the one of active pollination. And but to make a long story short, the wasp will load the pollen, the quantity of pollen it needs to fertilize the ovule in the figs in which it oviposits. If female figs get more ovules than male figs, the fig tree is not happy because not enough pollen enters the fig, and it can evolve toward producing more pollen, so pollen ends up on the body of the wasp. We're working on this for the moment on two species.
Yeah, I had a question about the proportion of short-styled versus long-styled flowers in things where the two are present in the
next together. Okay.
Next together. And so if I understand your point, you would predict that this proportion is kept as low as possible, the proportion of short-styled is kept as low as possible by the fig, just to produce the quantity, the smallest possible quantity of pollinators and produce more seeds. Just produce the quantity of pollinators you need. And even if the pollinator is not happy with that.
No, your prediction is wrong because in fact, active pollination leads to a decrease in the quantity of pollen grains you produce. This is true through all active pollination systems. It's universal. It's true in yucca moss. It's true in other systems too. So what is it that is wrong there? It's that it's the other things which are involved in pollen transfer which become important once. So here, what is important for the fitness of the tree? It's the quantity of pollen vectors carrying pollen leaving the figs. So it won't produce quite a lot of wasps to carry its pollen, because each wasp will, especially if it's active pollination.
You're saying that the proportion of flowers of different types and the proportion of pollen, everything is set in such a way that the optimal sex investment by the fig is
I don't know what is
optimal for the fig.
It's quite a number of wasps, and it's about half wasp, half seeds in general. And but you can go to the distribution of the flower lengths, and if it's a small fig, the distribution is unimodal, and if it's a larger fig, you will have a distribution going like this with a long tail. So it's not really something beautiful, and sometimes it's a bit bimodal. So yeah, but I mean, really, I think it's a wasp that automatically sets the equilibrium, but it's not bad for the fig tree.
I think that's something I didn't get, but what maintains active pollination, because if you look at the different factors that could maintain active pollination, I have the feeling that only the first one, the fact that the larvae needs to develop better on a fertilized ovule would actually maintain, well, put some selective forces to maintain active pollination, because the two other ones would perfectly work with passive pollination, right?
No, because if you're in the active pollinating, if the species is actively pollinating, you have no pollen on your body. If your host is active pollination, the pollen is restricted to the anthers, or few anthers, and the pollen is not shed into the fig cavity. So you do not get covered with pollen.
Yeah.
So if you are not covered with pollen, if you don't pollinate actively, you don't get seeds. But I'm preparing within maybe 1 year, I hope. All this will be in a PowerPoint on ALS that you can take for your courses. And all the arrows you had on all the pictures was just so that you would know exactly what it was. It was not necessary for this speech, but it will be useful for you.
And the last question. Yeah, I'll come back to that question. We know there are many reversals to passive pollination, and say the fig is starting it, but
no, the only instance I know is the fig started it.
yeah, okay. And what would be the selective pressure that because
So the one I was speaking about was if you don't have enough pollen coming in, which is specific to dioecious species. I was not speaking about the monoecious species, but in the dioecious species, it's clear that if it happens that the figs are very different in size between male and female, well, it can go the other direction. Monoecious figs are very constrained because you've got ovules, you can produce a seed or a wasp, so the seed and the wasp have very similar size. Of course, you can have small differences, but you don't have that much. Dioecious fig, you can have freedom comparatively to that with female figs with big seeds or small seeds and things like that. So either you need very little pollen in the female figs, or you can need very much.
It's a conflict on the male function of the fig that leads it
I think so. But on the other hand, we can look at biogeographic effects, and we find that there are some regions of the world where you never turn passive. In Africa, in Black Africa, there's not a single passively pollinated species. Not one. Why? We don't know. If you go to La Réunion, you've got one passively pollinated. If you go to North Africa, you've got one passively pollinated. But there you don't get. My imagination, but it's my imagination, says that we've got a problem with when a wasp, when it gets out of a fig, with passive pollination, it needs to clean itself. And if you've got ants, too many ants, it's more difficult. So we may suspect that in many cases you've got, but it's not, doesn't always work like that. Large trees are probably more often active. And it's easier to get passive on a smaller tree where you attract less things. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Just anyway. Sorry.
Another 40 years. Any more questions? Okay.
Well, thank you.